You are listening to the Empathetic Leadership Podcast, Episode 4. Today we're talking about the third principle of empathetic leadership, being mission-minded. Hey everybody, Ronnie here. With me as always is my regular co-host Jason. Welcome to the Empathetic Leadership Podcast. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for joining us. The podcast is produced by Hinderless Media and releases every Monday for your enjoyment. Show notes are found at hinderlessmedia.com. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Facebook. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get into the show. Jason, how are you doing this week, man?
It's been a busy week, but another week and another time for a great podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if I'd call us great yet.
Fantastic.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
We're the best.
We're going to be the best.
We're going to be the best. That's what we strive for.
Well, we got to have everybody out there in listener land keep us honest on that.
Yeah, for
Give
sure.
us your feedback.
Yeah, always emails are important. Commenting on stuff. You know, we read everything, and we want to know, what you guys are thinking. Right,
and I do want to say this. I should have mentioned this probably on an earlier episode, but we're recording these about 2.5 months out of whenever you actually hear them. So if you do give us feedback or you do email us anything, you don't hear it for a while.
That's why.
So
we got some pre-recorded stuff.
Right. So just want to make sure you guys know that we're not ignoring you if you start sending us emails or anything like that. It's just going to take us some time to get caught up real time to that.
Yeah, and we figure if anything, get some episodes out there just so you can get a really good feel of what this show is, and then go from there. And on top of that, future shows we can address any type of issues from the past. So we can figure it out.
Right. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about leadership again.
Leadership.
Yes.
Lead the ship.
So here's the thing. At the end of the day, our primary role as a leader is to push the organization toward its mission.
Yep.
But how does that feed into empathetic leadership?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously having a mission is super important for any type of business and really just in general. I think of it as goals. I guess a big, most important goal or whatever you're trying to achieve.
Right. And it's important. Like if you don't have a mission, you don't have a goal, you don't know where you're going. Well, then you're probably just going to run around in circles.
Yeah. I always think of any type of leadership. I always kind of reference back to music. Obviously, that was the world I've lived in for a long time. And if you always got to have some type of leader. And a lot of times, usually the leader in the band is the one that everyone gets mad at the most or gets frustrated with the most because they're the ones that have to make all the decisions, and then they a lot of times make very tough decisions. And it's interesting because if you don't have a leader and if you have a bunch of different leaders, you're just going in a million different directions. And it's like, okay, well, what are we doing? And actually, a lot of issues I've had in bands in the past is we didn't have a defined mission. Right.
It's kind of like a mission is your roadmap.
Yeah.
And your goals are like different points on that roadmap. But if you don't have that overarching mission, you could have a goal. Let's use the band thing, like, hey, let's play this show at, this honky tonk downtown Nashville.
And try to sell it out or try to do something with it.
Okay, you meet that goal, but then what next?
Right.
If you don't have...
What's really the point of all that? Now, is that... correct me if I'm wrong, but is that pretty much what the mission is? Is like, what is the point of what we're doing?
Right, exactly. And that's, really it's... I think you hit it right there where it's like, this is the point of everything. You think about like... Apple's the easiest one to kind of go to because they've got a very well-defined mission. Their mission is to provide streamlined, progressive products that are very easy for the user to use. So that's the reason why a lot of times people, I don't want to get into the iPhone versus Android debate, but people tend to disagree on it because...
I use Android, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Because the iPhone or the Apple products, they're made not to be super customizable.
Right.
Because of the fact that their mission states that it needs to be as easy for the user as possible.
Accessible.
And whereas Android, it's a lot more customizable because part of their mission is to provide these products that can fit into anybody's life. You can use it for whatever you want to use it for.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's like when you have a mission, it's like, what are you trying to do at the end of the day?
Right.
So,
how's that kind of, like you asked before, how does that play into empathetic leadership? Like when it comes to empathy and trying to deal with people and all that?
Yeah, well, we'll definitely, let's get into that. But there's a few things we've got to do before we actually can get into how it feeds into empathetic leadership. And one of the things is like, we've got to know our mission first and foremost.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like
Step one, know the mission.
how can you progress your mission if you don't know what it is?
Right.
And actually, that's a lot easier said than done, especially if you work for a larger organization. I think we've mentioned on the podcast that we've both worked for contract security.
Right.
Do you really know what their mission is?
No, not really. Not usually. To provide a secure place.
Right. we've got to secure the places.
Got to secure it and make sure things that are bad don't happen.
And so I can give you what our company's mission is.
Well, look at you.
Yeah,
Mr. Studious over here.
So I can't give it word for word. I'm sure that there's people that work with us that if they heard that, they're going to go, "Oh, Ronnie, look at you! You can't do it word for word." But but basically, it's like to provide the highest value for the lowest amount of price for the clients.
Yeah.
And it's kind of vague, but of course we've got some things. We have these little things called mission value cards that actually go more in depth into what that means. We've got like 10 principles under the mission on what that is: respect, kind of your typical stuff. But even then, like at the end of the day, it's not erroneous to say that at the end of the day, with a contract security, that your mission is to keep the places secure.
Yeah. And keep the client happy and, but like you said, keep the place secure and keep it running as, functionally as you can.
Right. So the thing is like, you've got to know your organization's vision, culture, and goals. And that's something where like, you couldn't sit here and name me off the mission, but I guarantee you with our company that you know what these things are.
Yeah.
Our vision, is very much, provide that service for as low a cost as possible.
Right.
And the culture, that's one of the things I really enjoy about the company we work for, is a people-focused culture.
Yeah, it has become more so that way too, I think, with different leadership coming into play. And we've actually been fortunate bringing you up from good old Mississippi. It's helped out a lot as far as supervisory roles because we have more people now that are more people-focused and not so... trying to be Mr. Macho, I'm the boss type of guy. We've had a lot of that, and I think that's been a lot of the reason why turnover happens. And that's for any industry. It's not just security.
Right. So what do you do whenever you do work for a company that doesn't have a vision and culture that fits into empathy, that allows you to be that more empathetic leader? I think that's a difficult question to answer.
It is, and my whole thought behind it would be to try and create a culture somehow through it, because obviously when it comes to this podcast, our biggest focus is people, and I have a whole episode on that, where it's, the people are the most important part of your business. And actually, I had a discussion with a friend today about that, and because he has his own business, and I said, when people start thinking about numbers and they start thinking about arbitrary things, which is, if you really think about corporations, when they're all cold and all that, all the stuff out there, Simon Sinek had it right. Like, it's arbitrary. They make up these numbers and they say, you have to hit these numbers. I'm like, but why?
Right.
Why are we? And then all these people get stuck in that. And then if they don't hit those numbers, then they feel bad about themselves. And then people get laid off or whatever. And it's just, it's a little ridiculous. And then you basically create this mentality of like, oh, I have to grind this out, and I'm miserable while doing it.
Right. And a perfect example of that actually is a company that I'm sure most of you probably heard of called GameStop a few years ago.
Oh, wow. That's actually a great example. Yeah.
Right. They have these, you've got to hit this many pre-orders or you don't get hours, blah, blah. And, recently they actually rescinded a lot of that because I think they've noticed like these numbers actually bring it down, and they've had to refocus their mission.
Well, and on top of that, I go on YouTube a lot, and I'll watch a lot of YouTube. There's a lot of hate going towards GameStop on YouTube. So it's kind of become a viral thing that a lot of people know that GameStop is a hard place to work for because of the reasons you just gave. Plus the way they treat a lot of people and So when it comes down to it, it's like when you treat people like that, you're going to have a lot of angry people, which means you're going to have a lot of bad publicity on top of it. And in today's world, with how quick things go, it's a bad move.
So, and I'm going to kind of go back to my question here on that. It's like, if you're a leader in GameStop, it's like, what do you do when you're in this place that has a mission that's hostile towards people? And I think the first thing you really got to do is know your own mission, your personal mission first.
That's a great point. Yep.
Because if you're going to make it your mission to take care of people, then the only way you're going to get there is to define that from the beginning, especially when you're in those hostile places. Like, okay, I know I want to take care of people. That's going to be my mission, even though I'm in this hostile environment. What are, the different stops along the way on this roadmap?
Right.
And so you've got to know what your own personal mission is. And that doesn't mean that your mission just has to be, I just want to take care of people. I make it very known within my company. It's like, I want to move up. I want to move up. That's also a personal mission.
Right.
But how I get there is by developing people, making, other people better. There's other ways to kind of bring that back into focusing on your team. But you have to know what that personal mission is first.
Yeah, I was gonna say because my whole thing is if you have a situation where it's a negative environment and it's not people focused and all that, maybe you'll disagree with this, but like you almost have to take the risk of just you're gonna have probably taken on the chin here and there and sacrifice numbers at times in order to gain the trust of your team. Number one, and say, hey, I've got your back, and then number two, to basically show them that it isn't just about at least when they work for you, it is not just about the numbers. It is about another goal of like making the company successful in whatever way that may be. And so like just focusing on the numbers, I think what happens is people get stuck on the numbers because they don't want to lose their job. Right. So they're like, oh, if I don't hit these numbers, I'm going to lose my job. It's like, but if you can explain out of it, and not only that, but you start... We've kind of talked about it last episode. You start hitting numbers eventually anyways, and you'll actually hit it more consistently because people are actually enjoying what they're doing. They're like, I'm in an environment that isn't miserable. If you're in a cold, miserable environment, I know Gary Vee talks about this all the time, where he's like, you walk into his building and you go, the one thing you notice usually right away is like, wow, people look like they actually enjoy what they do here. And then you go to a building across the street from his and they're like, wow, all these people look really miserable. Right. And there's the reason why he is known as Mr. Successful, and these other people struggle to keep people, and people bounce around to different places and all that.
And a more ground level example of that, let's just go with the GameStop. Actually, back in Mississippi, know a GameStop that's really successful, one of the more successful in the district. Mm-hmm. And so part of the reason why they're so successful is that they do have leadership there that worries more about their people than meeting the numbers. And actually, who was the general manager there is now like the district manager. One of the things he did was he didn't care about their formula for how many hours people get based on how many pre-sales they do. He gave people the hours they needed. And his people ended up happier. They ended up getting more pre-sales. And then all of a sudden, it didn't matter that he wasn't going by the formula because
he was doing better anyways.
His people were getting the pre-sales anyways.
Well, and I can go with a personal example on it. You kind of introduced me to the whole Simon Sinek thing, and I looked up kind of his style of leadership, and a lot of like what he says is good, and I wouldn't say he necessarily has applied a lot of this personally, but I tried some of his techniques and some of the things he recommended, just even with doing security stuff, and I can tell you, it's worked like a charm out there, because like people... I feel like people enjoy working with me. When I come in as a supervisor, they're like, "Oh, great! I'm ready to do that." I know he's got my back, and that's the key. Like, I was taught from day one from the people that I work with, like, protect your people no matter what, even if you have to sacrifice yourself. And I've had to sacrifice myself multiple times, and sometimes I look like an idiot when I do it. But I just want people to understand that you can trust me, and I'm not going to try to backstab you. And I think that's really, really important for any organization, especially for any leadership role.
Right. And another way you can take care of your people is also like making sure you know what their missions are.
Yeah. What are their goals? Like, what do they want to achieve? Like, why are they even there?
And at the end of the day, like, again, like the core of anything, we want to go back to empathy on anything. And like, how much empathy would you really have if you know your organization's mission and you know your own personal mission, but you don't know your team's mission?
Right.
And so it's like having those conversations. Like, what do you want out of this job? What are you looking to do? Oh, you want to advance? Well, let's start training you towards that. Let's help you accomplish your mission. Oh, you want to move on to a better job that isn't security for us? Okay, let's figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, what kind of skills can we get from... So what I tell, like, security is pretty simple. It's a pretty easy job for the most part. It doesn't take a lot to be great at it or to be good at it, but there's a lot of skills that can be developed and learned from it. And you can use that either within security and move your way up through the company if that's what you want to do, or you can utilize those skills anywhere else you want to go.
And I think that's true almost anywhere. I mean, there are plenty of skills right now that I use when I was managing a restaurant that I developed there.
Right.
There's plenty of skills that I developed in jobs previous to that. And it's about just figuring out what those things are that you can help your people develop while they're in your organization, even if they want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, one of the things is you want to make sure too that your people understand the mission of your company. That's one of the things, a lot of companies now do the mission and value cards. Most companies I've worked for, you have to have them on you whenever you...
That's how we are. Yeah, you got to have your value cards on you.
And so it's, you want to make sure that people don't just have that as like an emblem, but they know. Even if you don't work for an organization that has those cards, like, make sure you're communicating with your people on what the overall mission is.
Yeah, just so they know what, like you said, the why really is what it comes down to. Like, why are we even doing this?
Right, and it's also a question of expectations.
Yeah.
If people don't know what the mission is, you can't really clearly define your expectations to them.
Yeah. What are they even? And that's a frustrating thing. Any type of business you're in, if you don't know what is expected of you, it's... I think they did a study on that where they basically, they had classrooms and they basically... Oh, yeah, it was someone that they wanted them to write reports. And if they told them specifically what they wanted, students had an easier time writing the report, where instead someone said, write a story of any kind. And they're like, well, what kind of story do I write? Like, is it right? Am I doing it right? Is this wrong? Whatever. So you get kind of like, I don't know where to go with it. But then if you get specific of like, write a story about this street or about this school or whatever, it's like a little bit easier because like, okay, now I have a focused thing that I'm looking at and I'm not just wandering around with my ideas and hoping that I'm right,
Right.
And it makes it so much... It takes down that anxiety level because you're like, okay, I know what's expected of me. I know what I need to do, and we have a mission we need to accomplish. So you just go do it.
You're giving direction. You're telling somebody, like, you're pointing somebody in a direction and saying, walk this way.
Yeah.
And that's a lot easier than going, hey,
figure it out.
Find Northwest and go that way.
Just figure it out.
Yeah. But it's at the end of the day, like, we have this roadmap in our organizations, which is the mission, and if we're not giving our people the roadmap as well, they're just not going to know where to go. And that's egregious, and that's actually detrimental to your people because they're going to be sitting here doing the same thing every day, not necessarily in every organization, but they're going to be going through their work every day and just going, why am I even doing this?
Right.
What's the purpose of any of this?
Well, and I think there's something to be said when people believe in what they're doing and they come into work the whole thing of like going into work, and if you enjoy your job, you never work a day in your life. I actually heard somebody that made a good point on why that's not necessarily true, because no matter what, even the things that you're passionate about, you still have to work hard for it.
Right.
And that's true with anything else. And so I think if you have a defined mission and defined reason of why you're there, it creates a purpose in you. And when people have purpose, they go, okay, now I'm excited about what I'm doing, And I think that's really important in anything you find. If you're anybody that's listening to this, you're in a situation where you're like, I have no idea what my purpose is, and I'm just sitting around, I just do the same thing every day, and I go home and whatever, then, maybe think about what is the mission that you're supposed to be doing, and if it's not clearly defined, then maybe you find something else that is a little bit more congruent with that, because I can tell you it's going to be a lot more fun. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable for you.
Right. Now, here's the thing. Okay. So we've talked about, like, knowing the mission, knowing your personal, knowing the companies, knowing your teams. We've talked about, like, making sure your team knows what the mission is. What comes after that? Well, you got to work the mission.
Yeah, you actually do the thing.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
And really, like, that starts. One of the most important things to actually accomplishing the mission for your company is like placing the right people in the right places.
Yep.
To accomplish the mission. And I think this is something that I don't know if it's because I'm really good at it or just that there
this,
really is
intuition going on.
Yeah,
you know?
But it like
ESPN.
I feel like there's a lot of companies. ESPN. Okay, ESPN the Ocho. Like, let's just go back to the dodgeball here. But so all of you that are really young listening to this probably didn't get that reference.
Yeah.
But now it's one of those things where I don't know if it's just because I'm really good at it or if it really is something that's lacking. But I feel like a lot of managers don't do this really well. At the end of the day, like, you've got to have the absolute right people in the right places. When you've got somebody who's really, really strong at something, utilize that. Because it's going to make your life a lot easier. And that just comes down to paying attention to your people, like knowing what their strengths are, knowing what their weaknesses are. That way you can accomplish the mission in the best way possible.
Yeah, it's looking beyond yourself. The example I always like when it comes to stuff like this is I'm a huge fan of The Office, for anybody else that's out there. So a lot of my references, as a matter of fact, that ESPN thing was from The Office. But anyway, there's an episode where they have a new boss that comes in, Charles, and he's a terrible manager. And Idris Elba actually plays it really well because, like, every single time I have a hard time watching those episodes because of how bad the boss is there, and I've had bosses just like that. And I think that's why it's so good. Is like I feel the memories coming back from those terrible bosses, and they don't know where to put people in good places. In that episode, they put like Kevin, for example, answering the phones, which he is absolutely the worst for. And I remember Jim says something like, "Oh yeah, Kevin, he's about as good as you'd think he'd be at that job." Because
Right.
he's just I think they did a really good job of showing that like. This guy as a boss he gets work done and he's got some discipline going and everything. Those are the good parts of it, but the bad parts of it are that he doesn't listen to his people, he doesn't care about his people, and on top of it, because he doesn't do those two things, he doesn't know really where to put his people, and he puts all his trust in Dwight, who's a nutcase, instead of Jim, who's a little bit more of a normal, type of salesman. And so it shows all those flaws right there, and I think that's a huge sign of just a bad manager.
Right. And another thing, too, if you've got... Who was it that was on the phones? I never watched The Office.
Kevin.
Crazy.
Kevin. Yeah.
So if you put a Kevin that's not good on the phone, on the phones, they're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
Because they're going to feel like a failure every day.
Well, they're going to be stressed, too.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that scene shows it, because he doesn't know how to transfer a call, so he's like freaking out and he's stressed, and it's the same thing with anything else. Like, going to, like, a reference for us, you put somebody at a post that they're not comfortable with, or they're not capable of, or they don't want to be at, they're going to be miserable the whole time they're there. And so It's like, what are you really achieving with this? Where if you put somebody that like wants to do a good job out there and strives to do a good job out there, it makes it a lot.
Well, here's a question for you. What do you do with someone who thinks they're good at something and that's where they want to be, but that's not the best place for them?
That's a tough one. If anything, I guess you can come down to coaching and try to make them better at the thing. But if there's another spot that they would be better at, and that would, I guess, getting that message across to them that I know you want to do this thing, but trust me on this, that if you do these things, not only will you do well at it, but you'll probably move up. Or I think it comes down to, like, once again, their mission. Like, is it congruent with their mission, and can you make it congruent with their mission? Because if you can do that, then it's like, okay, yeah, I'm on board, But if not, they're going to feel like you're slighting them, and you're just saying that they're not capable of doing this thing. It's like, it's not necessarily a capability all the time. Sometimes it's like you said, it's not best for you to be in this position. So.
Right. And I think kind of simplify what you're saying is like, you've got to, it's kind of a dichotomy. You got to balance like the needs of your team versus the needs of the organization.
Yeah.
Okay. You really like doing the specific job that you're not good at. Well, I've still got to make sure that job gets done properly. So let's work together. Let's train you up more on what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I need you to understand that while we're training you up on it, you're either going to have supervision out there or doing the job, with someone training you, or you're going to be doing this other job that you are good at. And so it's communication, and just understanding and really like talking to your team member. That way they know.
And let them know you have their back. I think that's huge. I think they've proven over time that team, like group activity, whatever, when it comes to work is always the best way of doing things because you don't feel alone and overwhelmed. You know you got people you can lean on. And I think that's important in whatever industry you're in.
Right. The next thing we got to do is we've got to be consistent in mapping the progress of the mission. And basically what that means is like as, you know, things are happening within what your mission is, you need to be consistent in addressing those, whether it's detrimental, whether it's good. Mm-hmm. If you have someone that doesn't perform a job properly, you need to be consistent in addressing that the mission was failed within that job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always think of parents when it comes to consistency because that's what you have to be. I'm not a parent, but from what I've learned is that you have to be consistent with how you do things. You can't discipline because they did this one thing one time and then they do that same thing and you don't discipline them for it. And it's the same thing as like if they mess up a thing or they don't, you know, do something right and then you act a certain way or you treat them a certain way and then the next time you're fine with it. It's like, well, wait, what's the expectations here? What are we doing? You know?
And sometimes it's really uncomfortable. I mean, like in our reality, because right now we're talking about like what happens when someone, you know, fails in the mission.
Yeah.
You know, that can be uncomfortable. But the thing is like if you make sure that the person that you're talking to already knows that you have their back, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable, but they know. Okay,
they trust you.
He's got my back.
Yeah.
I need to listen to what's going on here, what he's saying, what he or she's saying, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing is like you have to earn in a lot of ways the right to, you know, to do that. Sometimes to have those conversations, but as long as you do, that takes a lot of the discomfort out.
And I think it's how you go about it too. If you go about it in a way of saying, you know, showing that you actually care and you're not just doing this to do it, you're doing it because there's a reasoning behind it, you know.
Right.
I think it's a lot better that way, and because there's all kinds of different ways of going about things, and if you go about it in an aggressive way where you don't explain yourself, they're just going to be like, what the heck, they just went off on me and I don't even understand why, you know, they're so mad or they feel bad about it. If you can really get to a point where it's like, okay, you made some mistakes and we need to correct these and here's why we need to correct these and here's why those mistakes are big time mistakes and why we can't make those mistakes because it's, you know, they have repercussions to them. You know?
And another thing you really got to do is make sure that you're fulfilling the mission.
Yeah.
Before you have any conversation, because like you know, we're kind of straight in to talk about your team members there, but you've also got to do it personally. You've got to look at yourself and be like, okay, you know, am I also continuing to fulfill the mission? Yeah. Because you know, if you fall off, your entire team's going to fall off. Like that's just the way it is.
And I've seen that. I've seen that recently at places I've been to. So yeah, I'm not gonna name any names, but yeah, I've seen that before. Where if it's not consistent, and the expectations aren't consistent, they just start to fade quickly too. Actually,
yeah. And on the other side of this, like you need to celebrate your victories.
Yeah, tell people they did a good job. I don't know why. There's like a lot of times I think people don't do that. Right. They don't tell them, hey, you did a great job today, man.
Yeah, and maybe that's just human nature because we focus on negative, and that's kind of.
I think some people think it's cheesy too. They think it comes off as like they're like you're not being serious about it, and it's just like no, like.
Well, people like to hear it.
Yeah, it actually brightens people's days. And I know like there's certain jobs out there they might not seem like a big deal or whatever, but being told you did a good job in a day when you really did do a good job, that you feel good about yourself. You go home going, you know what? Killed it today. I did a good job, you know, and then you want to go back again tomorrow and do it again. And there's going to be days, obviously, you have both. You have days where you just couldn't get anything right, and there's days where you're just like, you feel like you're king of the world and you can do anything. And you're like, I'm going to be in the next promotion because I'm doing so great, you know? So there's ebbs and flows to everything, and I think a good leader is able to stabilize that as much as possible to where it's not such a peak and valley, you know?
Right. If you're not celebrating the victories with your people, like it's like every day becomes a valley because of the fact that they don't know when they're doing good.
Yeah.
Did
I do good?
Right. and so it's really important, and like it doesn't have to be like this big grandiose thing. Like sometimes literally just like at the end of the day, just going good job team. Like that's enough of a celebration for everybody to be like, oh wow, we're actually appreciated here.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen you do it at places we've been to, and it completely changes how a team interacts. And there's people now that are in leadership positions that weren't there before you got there, and they're doing a great job. And there's a lot of reason for that. So I think congratulating them and building up their confidence. That's a key too, is building up confidence. I mean, obviously you don't want cocky employees that think they're better than everybody, but you want employees that are confident in their abilities, and they know, like, I'm going to do everything to the best of my ability, and if I do it to the best of my ability, the supervisors I have will back me up.
Right.
And that's huge.
Yeah, it's really important to have that feeling that, you know, your leadership has your back, and I think we've all probably been in a position where we haven't felt like that.
I've been in many positions,
especially like in that, you know, they don't ever recognize the good that I do. Because I mean, there's plenty of people out there that they only want to focus on the negative. They only have something to say when it's a disciplinary or whenever you've done something wrong, and that's just not the way we want to be.
Well, and there's a reason why those people have turnover and why they usually don't succeed as much. I mean, they still may succeed. That's the thing that's, I think, confusing sometimes. Is like, you could be a terrible manager and still succeed and still be great.
Right.
You know, still hit numbers and all that other stuff. But in the long run, number one, people are going to perceive you as a terrible manager. And then number two, if this is like a longitudinal type of study, the person that focused on the people and actually like gave a crap about their employees is going to succeed over time.
Not only that, but they're going to be happier in the long run.
Everyone's going to be happier. Yeah. And you're, like I said, less turnover. I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I think a lot of companies struggle with that. Whatever industry you're in, there's so much turnover because there's no loyalty anymore. And there's no loyalty because a lot of the employees, especially, you know, a part of our generation, we don't feel anybody's loyal to us.
Right. Well, loyal listeners.
Speaking of loyalty.
We time has gotten away from us.
As always.
I wish we could sit here and just talk to you for hours, but we can't. Don't worry. We want to respect your time.
Yeah.
But hey, if you guys got any questions for us, any comments, concerns, recommendations, anything, feel free to send it to us.
Yeah. Email us. Where's the email at?
It's at media@hinderlessmedia.com. So feel free at any time to email us. We want to hear from you. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, Jason, I think you mentioned it multiple times before in the past, we really want to build a community here.
Yeah. If we can get a bunch of people together that are like a bunch of people that are aspiring or already leaders or just leaders that want to get better or whatever, like we could have a community of people that you can create this thing where just multiple people are just learning from each other and it's a positive thing, and then you do better at your job or you end up getting that promotion because you're so much more prepared for it. I'd love that kind of a community. That'd be awesome.
Right. And we definitely, you know, anybody that sends anything to us, we want to be able to read what you've sent us on the air. I don't think that'd be a problem. I even do like special episodes where
I think so. Like where it's if answer to the mail or, you know, read the mail or whatever. You know, that'd be awesome.
Well, that is it today for the Empathetic Leadership Podcast. Thank you, Jason, as always, for your insight.
Heck yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you to each of you that have joined us. We hope you learned something today that you can make use, or that you can use to make life a little bit easier for you, your employees, and your senior leaders. If you have any suggestions to make the podcast better, feel free to email us at media@hinderlessmedia.com. And don't forget to review us on your favorite podcast provider. Have a good week, and we'll see you next Monday.
See you guys.
Sensational, that's what